Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? It's Joe here from Spain Speaks with an update on the current situation here in Spain, day 311 of the current situation, and it's all about records being broken here in Spain at the moment and some bad news related to one of Spain's most popular tourist destinations, but more about that in just a moment. Firstly, a big thanks to all of the people that left comments on the last video. Lots of comments, lots of debate happening there as usual. Thanks to people that supported the channel by buying merchandise, and a big thanks to my patrons on Patreon for your continuing support. Now, let's get into the news, and as I said before, it's all about records here in Spain at the moment. Unfortunately, they're not good records. Nobody wants to be breaking these records at the moment, but as we can see here, Spain added 84,287 infections in its worst weekend of the pandemic, and the incidence rate skyrocketed to touch nearly 700 cases. The Ministry of Health has notified 84,287 coronavirus infections this Monday since Friday. After a week of highs, this new data marks the worst record in a weekend after the start of the pandemic, after the 61,422 cases last Monday. On this day today, the health authorities have registered 455 more deaths. Since the beginning of the health crisis, 2,336,451 people have been infected in Spain, and 53,769 people have died. So, records being broken, huge numbers of new infections currently plaguing the country. As we mentioned yesterday, governments around the country are desperately trying to get the situation under control, talking about bringing in even stricter measures, bringing the hour of the curfew forward to 8 p.m. That will most likely be discussed tomorrow here in Spain when the central government sits down with the autonomous community governments to tackle the health situation. Politicians are under enormous pressure to get the rate of infections down after what they're calling the Christmas effect, and the face of the coronavirus here in Spain, Mr. Simon, believes that the third wave of the coronavirus could already be at its maximum peak. He points out that closing the inside of bars is more effective than curfews, although he acknowledges their socio-economic impact. Mr. Simon has once again emphasized that most of the positive cases for coronavirus that are currently in Spain have their origin in family gatherings during Christmas, although the exact percentage is unknown. Regarding the actions to control the pandemic, the director of the CCAES explained that one of the measures that has proven to be the most effective is the closing of the interiors of bars, as has been observed in the evolution of the contagions in the autonomous communities and their adopted measures. So Mr. Simon there clearly blaming the increase in cases here in Spain on family gatherings at Christmas time, and also saying that the inside areas of bars and restaurants are where people are most likely to catch COVID-19 here in Spain at the moment. Now, there's been a few comments in recent times by people asking me about the current situation of the vaccination plan here in Spain. As we know, the plan got off to a bit of a rocky start with various logistical problems, but apparently now things are back on track. Obviously, it's not as advanced as some countries, for example, the United Kingdom, where they're now talking about opening up 24-hour vaccination centres. But here in Spain, we can see that they have already administered almost 900,000 vaccines, 78.5% of the total amount received. The Valencian community continues to lead, and the Basque country at the tail. In total, 2,315 people have received the 2 doses of the vaccine necessary to complete the immunisation. So the vaccination plan back on track here in Spain, and some 2,000 people have already received the second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now let's have a look at the health data around the country by looking at a map of Spain and various autonomous communities. We'll start here with a map of the country, and we can see that the countrywide risk level is high. The total amount of cases now cracking the 2.3 million mark. We can see the accumulated incidence rate in the last 14 days sits at 689. There have been 843 COVID-related deaths in the last 7 days. There are currently 23,184 patients hospitalised with COVID around the country, and there are 3,287 patients with COVID in ICUs in Spain. Castilla and Leon, now the risk level there is high. The total amount of cases, the AI rate in the last 14 days now cracking the 900 mark at 910. There have been 47 COVID deaths in the last 7 days in Castilla and La Mancha. There are currently 1,204 people hospitalised in that autonomous community with COVID, and there are 172 people in ICUs, which is just over 31% of all ICUs in Castilla and Leon. Murcia now, and the risk level there seems to be stuck on medium, even though the accumulated incidence rate is now over the 1,000 mark at 1,081. There have been 39 COVID deaths in the last 7 days. There are currently 819 COVID patients hospitalised in Murcia, and there are 115 COVID patients in ICUs, which is just under 25% of all ICUs in Murcia. Now, some news about the tourism industry, and in particular one of the tourist meccas here in Spain, Benidorm. We know that Benidorm is a place that has suffered enormously over the last 10 months or so, as that mass tourism model hasn't been able to function during the pandemic. And we can see here that Benidorm, the ghost town, the vulture funds are hovering over their empty hotels. Tourism accounts for 14.6% of regional GDP and generates 287,749 jobs, which is 15% of all jobs in Benidorm. Now, all that is in danger, and there are only 11 hotels open. The Benidorm Tourist Emporium, which has taken 70 years to become one of the most important international benchmarks in Europe, may disappear in just 2 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The city of around 70,000 registered inhabitants, that almost 100% is dedicated to tourism, to which must be added its entire area of influence, the Alicante region of the Marina Baja, with more than 188,000 inhabitants, is experiencing its worst crisis. So some bad news there for Benidorm, with the vulture funds circling those empty hotels, waiting for their opportunity. Benidorm is one of those places in Spain that you either love or hate. I'm sure that there are many people that would love to see Benidorm disappear, but I know that there are many fans of Benidorm and don't want this to happen. And with newspapers like this one saying that the Benidorm Tourist Emporium may disappear within 2 years, things are not looking good in that part of the world. Now, the government has also come out yesterday and given us an update on the state of the economy, and we can see here that the government is preparing for 6 very tough months of economic crisis. The government assumes the worsening of its forecasts and rules out that Spain will once again be a tourist power in the medium term. And on the subject of tourism, the tourist minister, Regis Maroto, supports the vaccination passport of the EU, saying that it can reactivate mobility. The Minister of Industry, Tourism, Trade has expressed this Monday the support of Spain for the vaccination certificate at the European level that the EU is studying as a measure to demonstrate who has been inoculated against COVID-19 and to reactivate tourism. Maroto has endorsed the initiative that European leaders are going to debate at the Telematics Summit this Thursday at the proposal of Greece. This is good news as a sign of multilateral commitment. It could contribute to restoring mobility at the European level, the minister assured during her speech at the meeting of the Executive Council of the World Tourism Organization held at the Palacio de El Pardo in Madrid with the presence of the King, Felipe VI. So there we go, Spain in favour of a vaccination passport for the European Union, and no doubt they are willing to look at any measure that will reactivate the tourism sector in this country. Now let's have a look at some of the comments from previous videos. One here from Barry, good watch. Sounds like you're a little behind us here, Stuart. For the most part, we've seen reductions in cases, certainly local to me, south of Cambridge in UK. Hospital ICUs are under great pressure though, as the Christmas easing of restrictions flows through and the new strain that affected the southeast significantly. Yeah, Barry, thanks for the comment. We do seem to be a little bit behind the UK, not only regarding the infection rate, but also the vaccination plan. The UK seems to be very aggressive at the moment with the carrying out of that vaccination plan. And as I mentioned before, I think they're planning to open 24-hour vaccination centres in places like London. And as we saw before, that health official, Mr. Simon, seems to think that we are reaching the peak of the third wave. So hopefully that is the case and we can see a downturn in the amount of cases from now on. But as you mentioned, it's all about that hospital pressure, and while that is high, the restrictions will be in place, unfortunately. One here from Amanda, thanks for continuing to go through the news. We are relatively new here, and I'm still working out how to get news and learning the language. I enjoyed following you reading the news today. We have so few chances to hear Spanish with the restrictions combined with masks. Trying to avoid news that is heavily politically biased is hard when new to a country. Which online paper would you recommend that is middle of the road? Thanks. Yeah, Amanda, thanks for the comment, and good to see that you are settling into life here in Spain. The news here, unfortunately, can be a little bit confusing, difficult to understand, and there is a very heavy political bias, and it depends which newspaper you read. You've got newspapers on the extreme right, newspapers on the extreme left. There's a couple in the centre, but they seem to be getting harder and harder to find. I'm going to open this question up to the viewers out there to tell us which type of newspaper they prefer here in Spain, where they get their news from, which papers are in the centre, and which ones they would recommend to you. And regarding that point you make about learning the language at the moment, I imagine that it is difficult with people wearing face masks. You can't visually see what people are saying. You have to rely on hand gestures, and of course it's going to make learning Spanish a little bit more difficult for the time being. But stick with it, because as I always say, learning the local language is fundamental to enjoying this country. One here from 420. Your comments about mumbling and male speakers are so relevant to me as a learner with a Spanish partner and in-laws in Santander. Any more observations? Keep it up. Yeah, thanks for the comment. I mentioned this yesterday that I found some male speakers in this country difficult to understand. Quite a lot of people seem to mumble when they speak, not easy to understand. I don't know whether it's just here in Spain or it happens in other countries as well. Some people seem to have a problem with their enunciation and it makes it very difficult to understand them. I can relate to you about the in-laws part because I also had a lot of trouble understanding my girlfriend's brothers when I first came to live in Spain. And 20 years later, things haven't changed. One here from Femi. Hi Stu, keep going mate, nearly 1 year. In Mallorca, the Palma government also want an 8 p.m. curfew, which is pointless because there is nobody about in the evening, the place is dead. The government has previously stated that ventilated terraces are safer, but they forgot to extend the message to people's houses, which I feel is important to help prevent the spread amongst families. P.S. Bars and restaurants are closed here for another week minimum. Yeah, Femi, thanks for the comment. I have seen that it was Mallorca, one of the first places here in Spain to experience this third wave. Case numbers went up there very quickly, even before Christmas, and the government there has been quite strict in recent weeks to try to get the situation under control. I have a student in Palma de Mallorca, and she told me that it was clear why case numbers went up so quickly back there in December, because they didn't have a lot of controls and people were out and about, going to bars, going to restaurants like there was no tomorrow, or at least that was her impression of the situation. And the other point you mentioned there about ventilating houses, I think there was a campaign here at Christmas time. People were being told to open windows if they were going to have visitors inside, because as you know, here on mainland Spain, it can get very cold in the winter months. And of course, the last thing you want to do is open windows, but the government did make a point, or at least the television stations did make a point of telling people that they needed to have celebrations with open windows. Whether people took that advice, I don't know, but it appears that they didn't. One here from Lorraine. Hey, always look forward to your links. My question is, as we head to the tourist season, or not, depending on how the vaccine and cases pan out, do you think Brexit will truthfully alter how the British travel to Spain? And also, I live in Spain, have a contract for work, and have lived here 19 years. If I lose my job in the future, will I be able to stay? I'm only reading you need a contract to stay. Yeah, Lorraine, thanks for the comment. I'll answer the last part of the question first. I think it is true you need to have a valid work contract in order to stay in the country, if that is the type of residency that you have. If you have a work residency here in Spain, of course, it depends whether you are working or not. If you can't get a job, then theoretically you're going to have to leave the country. I know that every time I renew my residency permit, that is one of the conditions, that I am in employment, that I make money and I'm able to support myself here in Spain. What would happen if I lost my job or the work dried up? I'd probably have to change the type of residency status that I have. Because my girlfriend is Spanish, I could probably get a comunitario status, which means that I could live in Spain as her partner. And do I think Brexit will alter the way British people travel to Spain? Absolutely. It's not going to be as easy as it was before. You're going to have to go through a visa process, I think, as of next year. That's going to make it a little bit more difficult. But I don't think it's going to affect everybody in the way they travel to Spain. For example, people that come here for a couple of weeks in the summer months, I don't think they are going to be affected. I think that they're always going to get the same offers and deals that they have always had. But now, of course, as we know, people are limited to 90 days. So that's definitely going to affect that type of traveller. And another group of people that will also be affected were the ones that used to come to Spain and other parts of Europe on working holidays. Obviously, that has changed also. And finally, one here from Rob. I often have trouble understanding the clerks at the register in the store. They don't realise they need to enunciate more than they used to because they're behind a plexiglass barrier while wearing a mask that further muffles their mumbling. I used to be able to compensate for the mumbling by reading lips, but no longer. Yeah, Rob, thanks for the comment. We saw another person saying something similar, that they're having trouble with the language here in Spain at the moment because of face masks and those plexiglass barriers that are now a common feature in every establishment here in Spain. And I admit that it is difficult. You have to make an extra effort to understand what people are saying, and mumbling doesn't help. But what can we do? On that note, I'll start the wrap the video up. Questions and comments, please leave them in the section below. Debate the situation out as you normally do. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. I'll see you in the next video. Hasta luego.